contingent after the Soviet Red Army, the nearly million-strong teachers and staff of the French national school system. Well, summer's over. As of this Tuesday, that army is back on the march. President Hollande himself showing up at a school in northern France for a diligently conducted Marseillaise, on hand to tout the first major education reform of his mandate, the introduction of classes on Wednesday mornings. Exit the 4-day school week. Up to now, French pupils enjoy Europe's shortest school year. 9 weeks vacation during the summer. 144 days in the classroom sum total. Those 140 days, though, are action-packed. Europe's third longest school week, 6 hours a day. That leaves little time for extracurricular activities like sports and the arts. So why are so many teachers and local councils against lengthening the school year and lightening the load? Fewer than 17% of municipalities will implement the reform as of this year. More broadly, as academics-obsessed France grapples with yet another top-down reform, which model works best in Europe? Amid soaring youth unemployment, what is the best way to prepare today's youth for tomorrow's job market? Today in the France 24 debate, is French education falling behind? And with us to talk about it is Jean-Rémy Girard, National Secretary of the SNALC Teachers Union, and a teacher in the, I guess you would call them the exurbs, right? It's a bit far for the suburbs of Paris, in the southwest of the capital.
The country.
Saint-Arnaud-en-Yvelines. Barbara Morose, principal of the American section at primary school at the Lycée International. That's in the western Parisian suburb of Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Thank you for being with us. Peter Gumbel, author of France Has Got Talent, all about the French education system seen from the inside at one of its elite institutions, the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome back. And welcome to Paris correspondent for Swedish daily Svenska Dagbladet is Johan Tolbert. Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, and you have our hashtag F24debate. Barbara Morose, first day of school today. Do you still get butterflies on the first day of school?
Perhaps not butterflies, but I'm very happy when the day is over and everybody's happy and everyone finds their correct class and the children have a good day. So, yeah, the first day is special. It's very special.
There's less work, but somehow there's a lot of anxiety with that comes with the first day of school.
Yes, making sure everybody shows up, that the classes are ready, that the books are ready, that the children are happy with their teachers, that they find their friends. It's a new beginning. So it's very exciting.
Is every year the same?
Yes and no, because it's like an ocean. The ocean looks the same, but every year it's a little bit different because there are different children, different families, new and old. It's not really the same, but there are some things you can predict.
All right, well, one thing that is definitely different is the scrapping of the 4-day school week, or at least the attempt to scrap the 4-day school week. French kids will be going from 144 to 180 days a year in school.
The school calendar is set up for pupils, not for municipalities, and not for the teachers who sometimes have other occupations. They are made for pupils because that is our mission, our duty. They'll be able to go to the museum, and they'll be able to have music lessons or drama lessons.
He also mentioned sports, by the way, in that. Jean-Rémy Girard, this reform is for the kids. Your reaction to what the French president was saying there?
I think this reform is quite useless, actually.
Really?
Really, yeah. It doesn't change what's in the school. It doesn't change the number of hours in our school, the number of hours in a week. It's the same number than before, than the 4 years week. 4 days week.
Over the week, but what about over the school day? Does it mean that the kids will get out a little bit earlier in the evening and get home a little earlier?
Actually, each school will be different. It's not the same everywhere. You'll have some pupils who will leave earlier, some earlier on some days, but not on other days, and sometimes they'll just have a longer lunch break. It happens in some schools, just a longer lunch break.
Now, your municipality, your school district, deciding to put it off for a year, this introduction of the Wednesday morning classes. Why?
It's very complicated because you have to find many people in order to keep the pupils and in order to
Right. So all the
have
activities that
Yeah.
that the president was talking about, you need monitors, you need counselors
Exactly.
for those activities, and you haven't found them yet.
No, we don't find them everywhere because in some places, in big cities, it's easier. But in the country, for example, we don't have museums in the country. We don't have all that. And in some school, there will be only just watching at the pupils just doing nothing. Or it will happen. They won't have anything interesting, in fact.
Barbara, you don't teach in the country, you teach in a city. And you were telling us before we went on air that your city decided late in the day not to implement the new rule.
Right. Saint-Germain did a huge study. They had many meetings with all the constituencies, and some basic questions were asked of those counselors and people who would be taking charge of the children. For example, who pays us? How do we get paid? What do we get paid? Who is responsible? Who picks up the children from school? Do they have to be back for the 4:30? And many of these questions didn't have answers yet. And that was only one meeting. And I think just altogether, Saint-Germain decided it would not be responsible of them to start this in the fall. They needed more time.
They needed more time. Again, this was not what the French president and his education minister were saying when they showed up at that classroom in northern France this Tuesday. The issue of what to make of Wednesdays, the education minister just a few days ago said that's what at the heart of this reform. Vincent Payon.
It's a quiet revolution because we're going to give lots of children access to activities to which they didn't have access up until now. Only 20% of kids go to day camp on Wednesday mornings. And you have to pay. Now we'll have 80% of kids who will enjoy 3.5 hours of better organized extracurricular activities. Teachers are working on it with day camp personnel and local councils. The president and the National Educational Subsidies Board have made plans so they'll be free.
Peter Gumbel, the government says that it's put money aside to pay for those counselors and to get all this up and running, to have people to monitor all those extracurricular activities. Are you surprised to hear the panelists say that they're underwhelmed by this reform?
No, I mean, this whole thing is a complete shambles. Essentially, you have to back up for a minute and look at the problems of the French education system. In the last 10 years, you've seen a growing number of young people leaving school without the basic skills to survive in the real world. And in fact, the international studies show that as many as 20% of French kids have trouble with really basic reading and writing. The government knows that the school system, which used to be the pride of the country, is not performing well. And the new minister has come in with a whole agenda of what to do, but changing anything in the system is very difficult. So the first reform is this one. And it's, as my colleagues here were saying, a relatively minor issue compared with some of the bigger problems of literacy.
But hang on a
and
second,
numeracy.
Peter. In your own book, you said that way too much attention in France. There's an obsession with math and with grammar. It's not a well-rounded education, is what you wrote in your own book.
Right.
This idea of more extracurricular activity. I can show you. And there's here a tweet from one viewer saying the reform sounds like a good idea to me. Leaves kids with a bit more energy at the end of the day for other activities.
Right. Well, and it's certainly the intention of having more extracurricular activities is a good one, because France and French schools have much less sport, for example, than they would have that you have in the States or in Britain. But the problem is the whole process of implementing it has been so difficult that rather than having the whole country changing with a very centralized education system, it's been controversial. And so you have some municipalities saying they will do it and others saying they won't do it, not right away. So you've got different phase-in. You've obviously got issues with staffing. And And finally, I mean, what's interesting is that you're going back to a system that actually existed until 2008 in terms of the hours. This Wednesday morning thing, there's a lot of fuss about it, but actually
it used to be Saturday morning.
it used to be Saturday morning as well, and then you had Wednesday morning as well, and that was abolished by Xavier Dacot in 2008. So what's happening is there's sort of a rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic, if you like, whereas the fundamental issues of how do you make the school curriculum more interesting? How do you get kids more engaged? How do you modernize education? Those are the fundamental issues which are not being addressed. I mean, one of the other ones which is on the cards and will come through is how do you train teachers better to stimulate kids? The French teacher training system has completely fallen apart, and now this government is trying to put it back together again. That's much more important than whether you go to school on Wednesday morning or not.
Johan Toller?
Yeah, I think my colleague says something very important there. That French school is often known as being, pupils are being like subjects, like objects, like they are
Regimented,
passive,
shall we say.
a regiment a little bit. And I think this is perhaps a good attempt to make them more subject-like, to be more active and to be more creative. I have that impression because I remember anyway when my kids were small and they were in French school, public school, and I remember this fact that they should do this and this and this and this, and they had no time for own reflection, or they didn't have any stimulation in that kind of field of being more active, in fact.
This kind of debate, the kind that Peter was talking about a minute ago, he was saying how there's this sort of unwillingness to broach this more fundamental debate on how do you make teachers more in tune with the kids' needs? How do you help the children be more engaged with what they're learning?
Yeah, how you teach, who do you choose to teach to the pupils, and what do you teach? That's the fundamental debates nowadays. I don't think that nowadays French pupils as little soldiers. That's not true. That's a cliche. That's not what's happening in schools in France nowadays. That's really not that. The main problem for us, for teachers, I think, is that that's perhaps really surprising, but we don't have enough time to do what we need to do with the basics. For example, in primary school, we know how to teach a foreign language very early, but French teachers do not know how to teach a foreign language in primary school. They are not trained to do that. So you took hours where they used to teach French. Now they have to teach English. They don't know how to teach English. So you don't teach English and you teach less French, for example.
And so you run, time becomes too short. You need more time, basically. You need a longer school year.
Not exactly, but we need to do the main things first.
Right.
I think that's the problem. We want our school to do a lot of things. We want our school to do computer training. We want it to do foreign languages. We want it to do a lot of things, morals and ethics. And sometimes we just forget that we have to teach them how to read, how to write, and we don't teach them that the good way nowadays.
But some people say that one of the selling points of the French system is that it is pluridisciplinary. In Britain, at a very young age, when you get to secondary school, you can branch off and no longer do any science whatsoever or any literature whatsoever if you want.
I'm not sure that's, I think, the content in primary school, which is, where I spend my time, is gotten, as my colleague was saying here, they've added on and added on and added on. And basically what this reform does is put 3 hours on Wednesday or Saturday, but it doesn't take away 3 hours in a block. It takes away 45 minutes a day. And so that's very chopped up. And it will be very difficult for them to do anything constructive with those 45 minutes. So you're basically going to lose those 3 hours. And some children can just go home. If they do not want to do an activity, they will not have to do an activity. I understand next year the content is going to be looked at again. They're going to review the programs and see if they can.
This is a work in progress.
Yeah.
Interesting when you read today's French press, because it was sort of turned on its head a little bit. And by the left-leaning tabloid Libération, its front page headline, Rhythm and Blues, the rhythm of the school year, as the play on words there, reminding readers it was only 2008 when the last government, the Conservatives, scrapped Saturday morning classes. The issue of what to make of those Wednesdays at the heart of the education minister's sell of the reform. But as you see here, the paper saying that in 4 years, school teachers have gotten used to the 4-day week. Many are women who've organized their family lives accordingly. It's kind of the idea. And this is coming from a left-wing paper. The heart of Libération's readership, by the way, is school teachers. So a lot of them vote socialist. But their idea is kind of, well, the teachers, they want an easy life, and they kind of like the 4 days so they can have less time to work.
Not sure it's an easy life to be a French teacher nowadays. But of course, they got used to it. They organized themselves. The youngest teachers don't know how it was before. I've never experienced it. And they'll have to go to the school one more day. Sometimes they don't live near their school. They have to take their car. They have to pay for that. They have to pay for their children. So they see all minor drawbacks, but drawbacks still. And that's not really engaging.
All right, Peter Gumbel, it's what we get is the sense that it seems to be impossible to get what we described as this giant army of school teachers across the country together into a conversation where you can press forward on the issues that you were spelling out.
Well, I think if you look at education pretty much anywhere, it's a very conservative institution. People don't like changing, mucking around with schools. It's very difficult. And in Britain, there's been a debate about changing school systems that's gone on for years and years. And you've got the current government, which is once again trying to change the exams. So it's complicated and very political. Every parent is somehow engaged in this debate. What's interesting about France, though, is that what's different about France is you have an incredibly centralized system. There was a minister about 15 years ago who called it a mammoth, which is very, very difficult to
That you needed to skin.
You had to skin the mammoth, and how difficult that was. And he actually was one of about 30 ministers since 1958, since the Fifth Republic, who've been ministers of education. They come and go because it's such a difficult task to change anything, and they fail. And it'll be interesting to see whether the current minister actually achieves anything at all apart from this attempted reform. But really what's interesting about France is, because it's so centralized, you don't have the tools available that you have in other countries where you have a much more localized system, where you have local authorities financing the schools, where you have the schools themselves having a lot of say in how they teach and what they teach and the hours they teach.
All right, and
here everything has to happen, across the country in one go.
All right, and how that school should look like is something that we'll pick up on when we come back. This is the France 24 debate.